Your note. There it is. Acting like I'm at home. Check, check.
Margaret, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
When you close and you get all your documents, if you're on the buyer side, do you always get the seller's settlement statement with your packet?
Those two.
So they won't give me the seller's statement.
Well, then just make a note in, the, whatchamacallit.
Yeah, I just put a Word document in there because Bob texted me,
Yeah,
what do you mean they didn't give it to you? I'm like, they don't want to give it to me. So
Yeah, that's unusual, but whatever.
it is, especially when he was paying assessments. But maybe they don't want us to know what he paid.
No, we're not doing team rally. We don't care about that this week. You could co-host me. Casey, do you need a second? Sure. We should probably know how to do almost 90% of these. We'll see, there might be some new things. I found all kinds of new things when I started this. This one I know, I exercised last night. Okay. Hi. All right, we have a small group today. All right. All right. All right. So today, what we're going to talk about is beyond the exclusive right to buy, exclusive right to sell, and the contract to buy and sell. So those classes, you guys can find those all over the YouTube channels, right? And we teach those on a recurring basis. And what I learned recently, working with agents, was you don't know all the rest of the story. So I'm putting together this new class. It's the first time I'm teaching it, so bear with me. But it's going to be loaded with information and a lot of best practices, right? Because the goal is that once you get under contract, so Casey, once you get under contract, contract to buy and sell, the last thing you need to do. That's a big fat no, right? Whoops, that was a big fat Margaret, took it down too low. Okay.
When you're first under contract, like you first put your contract to buy and sell in?
Yeah, you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent. The last document you ever have to work on is the contract to buy and sell, right?
No.
No, not even close. So we're gonna work on that. So the first thing I need to figure out how to do is I need to put in the chat the document that I'm working from so that you guys on Zoom can capture it. So I put together an entire packet to help you. Is this the right button? I hope so.
Am I the only one on Zoom?
You are the only one on Zoom. How fast can you get here? And then we'll just do it this way. Here's my advice, so let me know when can you see that in chat?
Yeah,
Ace, okay. So my goal is that we can fill in all of these blanks, so, there's another. Okay. I just put something in the chat. I don't know if you joined before I put it in the chat. Would you look to confirm if you can see the documents or not? Okay. Let's get started. Stacy, there's how many pages? 84 pages? Something like that. So we got a lot to do in 90 minutes. Okay? If we don't get through it all, that's okay. We'll just pick it up in a future time. All right? Somebody's chatted back to me. No docs. All right, hold on. Let me upload them again. Okay. All right. So the first document I have on the screen. So here's the best practice I can give you when you take a contracts class. These documents, write on them, print them, make your notes, so that then when you're under contract, you can go and actually look at those documents and off of your notes, at least have an idea of where to start. Okay? So that's my purpose today, is to hopefully get you guys in a place of where do I start and what do I need to do. So the first document we're going to talk about is definitions of working relationships. This is actually not a document that's required by the Market Center. However, I believe that it is a very good document that you can use with either buyers or sellers when you're in your first meeting with them. And I'm actually using it now, I'm having people sign it, that they understand the different levels of relationships that we as real estate professionals can have with clients. So again, it's not a required document, but it is a document that is very helpful in understanding. I recently did Stacy and I together, recently did a buyer consultation, and I went through this, and these people had actually talked to other brokers. And the answer they said to me was, no one has ever explained it as well as you just did. So let me kind of tell you how I explain this document. So, Mr. Potential Client, there's 3 different levels of relationship that a real estate professional can have with a client. The first one is the agency relationship. It is the highest level of representation. In an agency relationship, you can only represent one party of the transaction at that level. So you're either working as a seller's agent or a buyer's agent. It's kind of like a coach on a football field. Although this time of year, I probably switch it to basketball. It doesn't matter. Coach on the side of the lines of the football team. And he's watching the game. He's done his homework. He knows other teams' plays. He's done his scouting. And his role as the coach is to help them win the game. In many ways, as an agent, I am loyal to you, like the coach is loyal to his players on the field or on the basketball court. I'm your advocate. I am working for you. I am your fiduciary. The second level of relationship is transaction broker. A transaction broker can represent one or both parties of the transaction at this level. The transaction broker is loyal to the transaction and not necessarily either party. While I'm still treating you or everyone else honestly and fairly, I can't give you advice. I can't give you my professional opinion. I can only tell you, here's the process, what do you want to do? Think of it like the referee on that football field. The referee cares about one thing, making sure the game is completed on time and everybody plays by the rules. The last one is the lowest level. Basically, there is no representation, and that's a customer, which means that particular party is out there unrepresented and has no real anyone helping them at all. Okay? So guys, that's how I explain that. And as I'm seeing more and more people come on, I've been pausing. So I'm gonna go ahead and once again, put in the chat the documents that we're using. If you are out there, I really encourage you guys to get these printed as fast as you can, so you can take notes, and have what you need. All right, this is the last set. I have one. I have one right here. If you do one. Okay, awesome. All right, so those of you that just joined, hopefully you can see the documents. Okay, so this document, definitions of working relationships, I use this now with both my buyers and sellers. Okay, so now if we flip to the next document in your file. This one is the seller advisory, okay? This document was created by our attorney. It is a required document in the market center whenever you have a listing. And I'm gonna clarify one thing really quick about the class. I am talking, all of these documents I'm referring today is if you're buying a traditional single family home. If you are getting into land, investment properties, mobile homes, there's different versions, but the documents are similar. So if you know this, you're gonna be able to do 90+% of the other documents for those other types of properties. Okay? Seller advisory, you're gonna give to your seller who's buying residential. I'm not gonna read this to you. I encourage all of you to read it. You're gonna learn a ton. But how I explain this to my sellers is this, Mr. Seller, the seller advisory is a document that walks you through everything that can happen during a real estate transaction. And then I literally, because I do my consultations usually on Zoom, I will literally say, so it talks about how compensation is negotiable. It talks about contingencies. It talks about surveillance in your property. It talks about earnest money disputes. What happens? It advises you not to give the buyer possession before you close. It talks about water rights, it talks about loan fraud, it talks about the rules that I have to follow with the MLS. And I just scroll the page and I land on whatever happens to be there. Okay? For you guys as agents, read this. You guys are gonna learn so much. For those of you that have had transactions, have you ever actually read this? It's a really good document for you to be able to answer a lot of the questions that your seller is going to give you along the way. Okay, so not gonna go.
Margaret,
Yes, ma'am.
at what point does this go to in front of the seller?
I do the definitions of working relationships, the seller advisory, at the same time I'm reviewing the exclusive right to sell.
Got it, thank you.
Yep. Oh, I did not put these in the order I wanted them, but that's okay. Bear with me, you guys will be fine. Okay. Referral agreement. This should have been at the end. My apologies. I lined up 84 pages of paper. I didn't do exactly what I wanted. However, referral agreement. This is the document that you use when you're doing an agent to agent referral. So you guys all know what that means, right? We've talked about those, right? An agent to agent referral. If I'm Letitia and one of my friends from Alabama wants to buy a house and I refer to an agent in Alabama, I'm gonna get a portion of that agent's compensation, right? So this is the document, this is a form that Damien has created. So Damien is our office attorney. But this is the document you would fill out. You're gonna date it, you're gonna put your client's name on it. Although it's interesting, if you look on page 2, this is where you put the client information. So if the client you're referring is a seller or a buyer, you're gonna actually enter that information on page 2, and it will feed it up to page 1. Okay? Referring licensee is you. In this example, it has my name because I had to pull it out of my CTM, so your name goes there. Unless you wanna give me all your referrals, and then I'll be happy to take them. Please, all of you laugh. Don't be so serious. Then you're gonna put your state you're licensed in and your license number. And then obviously our brokerage firm is Keller Williams Avenues Realty LLC. And then our EIN number is the EC number that you can look up in DORA, or probably most of you have it in your CTM. The receiving licensee is the name of the person you're sending the referral to. So if I'm sending a referral to, I'll just make up a name, she's local, but Courtney Olson. If I'm sending it to Courtney Olson, she would be the receiving licensee name. Then I would either ask her for, although, you know that license numbers are public information. All you have to do is go to Alabama real estate license lookup and I could look it up. Okay, so I know what state she's in, I can get their license number. The receiving brokerage firm, that's gonna also be in that licensee lookup. And then the referral fee. So if it's a flat fee, you're gonna put the dollar amount. If it's a percentage, then you're gonna put 25%. And then I would tell you to be very crystal clear what it is. 25% of what? Usually it's the GCI, which is a known acronym in our business. It stands for gross commission income. So that might be 25%, it might be 20%, it might be 30%, because guess what? Just like everything else in real estate, your referral fee is negotiable, exactly. The other thing is down here in the body of it, where it says commission on any transaction conducted by the client within, that's the time frame. I'm telling you guys, I've started doing them for 2 years. At least 12 months, right? So figure out what your term is, how long you're gonna do it. I have an outbound one right now, I'm gonna be paying the referral out, but literally, I've been, I got the referral like 18 months ago. And I think we might actually get something going this summer.
So can I ask you a quick question? You know, I asked you recently for a commercial contact, so I called your guy and really nice. We didn't do anything formal because it was so preliminary.
Uh-huh.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I mean, it was very early. I
The
connected
sooner,
him.
yep, the sooner you do it, the sooner you've got it in documentation that you made that agreement.
Okay,
So in perfect world, great question, in perfect world, it would be ring, ring, I've got this client, how's the 25% or whatever your referral fee is, great, let me create the document and I'll shoot it over. The woman who gave me the referral, the one that I'm about to finally actually get to the finish line, hopefully this summer, she never sent me a referral agreement. If I was unethical, I wouldn't even have to stay in touch with her. Funny part is, she had activated her license, and now she's got to go reactivate her license to be able to collect the commission. Okay, all right, you can buy these forms in CTM or through the office. All right, how we doing, Zoomers? Are you keeping up? Okay, all right, brokerage disclosure to buyer. This document changed as a result of the NAR settlement. You can use, again, it's not a required document in the market center unless you are working with a buyer that you don't sign an exclusive right to buy with. So if you are the listing agent and you're working with the buyer and they're a customer, this form just got mandatory. If it's a buyer that you are signing an exclusive right to buy with, it's not required. Okay? So the front part of it is identical to the definitions of working relationships. I'm not going to go back through that. The bottom section between the below the line is where you're disclosing. It says very first words, broker and buyer reference below have not entered into a buyer agency agreement. Okay, so because it says that, you're going to describe what you're helping them with. It's usually going to be a single property. Okay, so here's how it's going to happen. You're the listing agent, because you're all going to have listings soon, I can feel it. You're going to have a listing, you're going to be hosting an open house, you're going to get a sign call, and somebody's going to think they don't need representation. Okay, you're going to immediately pull this form out and you're going to go through it. You're going to explain the different relationships. You're going to say to them, I am happy to work with you, but understand, I have an agency relationship with the seller. I don't know you. So you would be a customer. I am happy to do that with you, or I'm happy to refer you to another agent in our office who can therefore work with you at that agent level relationship. You want to give them the option. Okay? If they say, no, Christy, I want you, you're the best in town, I just know it. And so they want you to work with them as a customer, then you're going to fill this form out. And you're going to, on that first line, you're going to put in the physical address that you're helping them purchase on line 1. And I think that's the only way you're gonna use it, because you're not gonna treat somebody as a customer and go show them a million properties, right? Now, if you meet someone in an open house and you go show them properties before you sign the exclusive right to buy, what are you? Your transaction broker. You might use it in that example, okay? So we're gonna do this first form as if it's a customer, and then I'll go back as if it's an open house and you're gonna go show them a couple other houses during the day. Fair enough? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So what about like with an online lead? So if someone inquires from an online lead and says, I wanna see this one specific home. And if you go to meet them and they wanna see just that home, you can bring them this if, before you sign an exclusive right to buy.
Yep, your answer is gonna be the same as if you met them in an open house or a signed home, you're just gonna show them 1 or 2 houses, okay?
Right, okay.
But let's say they wanna buy, they wanna create an offer on your listing. We're gonna start there and then we'll go to the other scenario, okay? If they're gonna do that, you're gonna on the first line write the address of your listing. You're gonna check the box, multiple person firm. And then on the second page of this document, how are you going to represent them? Well, if you're there buying your listing, you're gonna check customer. And then you're gonna say broker is the seller's agent, right? Broker intends to perform the following list of tasks. So what are you going to do for this person that you're treating as a customer? Well, you're probably gonna show them the property, right? You're probably gonna prepare and convey written offers. So you would check the boxes that are appropriate there. Okay? And then you're gonna have them date and sign it. You could use customer for brokerage listings, transaction broker for other properties. You could do that as well. But if you know they're gonna write only on your listing, I would just do customer. Here's the good news. Who all has a phone a friend? Every single one of you, right? Okay, then the third page is the buyer broker let's go back. So now let's go Jen's example, which is the same as if you meet them at an open house. So if they're an online lead, or you met them at an open house. You're gonna go down and the second line says, or real estate which substantially meets the following requirements. Maybe you're gonna show them 3 or 4 personal residences in Arvada or Lakewood, right? It's that same more generic term that we use in our exclusive right to buy. Or if they're like, I only want you to show me 1 property, then put the address there. So you have an option in that section, okay? If it's not your listing, you're still gonna check multiple person firm, but on the back side of this, now you're going to be a transaction broker. See the difference? Okay, you're gonna have them sign it. Then you're gonna go to page 3. This is the buyer broker compensation agreement. This is where you're disclosing to the buyer who you don't have an agency relationship with, how you get paid. So in the, it says, buyer's brokerage firm will be paid a fee equal to, this is where you put your success fee in. Right? Whatever your success fee is, that goes there. And basically this is where you just explain to them that how you get paid. And while, yes, sellers, we're still seeing a high percentage of the sellers that are out there that are paying the buyer broker. If they don't, you will. Now, the hard part about this agreement, notice that we face for a minute. Does anybody have any questions on the agreements? On this brokerage disclosure to buyer? Luann? I only see one face, so I'm gonna trust that if I see Casey's good, the rest of you are. Okay. The thing is with this document, what stops them from going to another broker and actually putting in the offer?
Nothing, they can do it.
Nothing. So you could take this open house guest or this online lead who doesn't tell you the whole truth because their buyer's up skiing in Vail with Karen, okay? And they have you show the house and go, thanks, Jen, I really appreciate it. And then they call their agent who's up skiing and say, I saw this house. I didn't sign anything that tied me to another agent, but I got him to show it to me. Now go write the offer. So this doesn't protect you. I wanna make sure you guys understand that, but however, it's a very valuable document. The other place where we are using it a ton is we are actually displaying the brokerage disclosure to buyer on a stand-up stand at our open houses. That's got the address on it and it's filled out transaction broker, except if it's our listing, then it shows customer. And then if they start talking to us, they just start saying, well, you know, we really like this house and we're thinking about putting in an offer. And here's our motivation. We stop them. We pull a blank copy out. We go through the entire thing with them and have them sign it before we get too deep in conversation. Because you don't want to get too deep in conversation and have them tell you something that you could use to negotiate against them. Okay? All right, thank you, Nora. All right. The other document that we use when we work with buyers is, that was so shocker, Damien created one of these, a buyer advisory. So this is a required document when you fill out an exclusive right to buy. I would give this also to any buyer that you're helping, whether it's a transaction broker or even a customer. It doesn't hurt to give them a disclosure. You guys have probably all heard the saying, no one's ever been sued for disclosing too much. So give this to any buyer that you're working with, and regardless of the relationship. And I would also give the seller advisory. If your buyer is buying from a for sale by owner, I give the for sale by owner the seller advisory. Okay, it can't hurt you. Okay, same thing, it goes through everything that can happen in a transaction, and I encourage you guys to read it. Okay? How we doing? We're a half hour in, and we haven't even scratched the surface. All right. 84 pages, guys. All right. Listing contract amends or extends. So anytime you are making a change with your buyer or seller, who you have an executed exclusive right to either sell or buy, whichever is appropriate, and you're making a change to those terms, you're going to use this form called listing contract amend extend. So it could be that you're extending your date. Maybe it's coming up close to expiration and you're gonna extend your listing term. Or maybe you just fired them and you're gonna shorten your listing term. Okay? If you have a change in purchase price on your listings, you have to show that in this document before you make the price change in the MLS, right? And it actually calls it out. The price or rental rate, in this case, the price is changed to. So we should see, for those of you guys that, if you have a situation where the seller insists on taking go high on their pricing and it's not selling, and so then they go, well, let's drop the price. And then let's drop the price, and you're chasing the market down. You need an amendment to your listing contract every time you do a price change, so we should be able to line them up with the price changes that we see in the MLS. Okay, it's fairly intuitive, you put the date on it, you check the box, what kind of document you're changing, is it right to sell, right to buy? If it's a right to sell, it's gonna pull over the legal description and the street address for you, and then you're just gonna type what you're changing. Number 3, we've talked about with the NAR settlement now. Let's say you've signed a buyer agency agreement and your agreement with your buyer is your compensation is gonna be 2.25%. Let's just pretend. But you go out to a new build and the new build's paying 5%. By the way, I heard the other day there's a builder out there paying 5%. Well, how much money based on your exclusive right to buy are you allowed to take? In my example, which was 2.5%, right? Well, you want the 5%. So you go to your buyer and say, hey, guess what? The builder's offering me 5%, so we need to change my agreement so I can get paid 5%. Boy, is that gonna be an awkward conversation. But if the buyer says, absolutely, Jen, you're worth every penny, then this is where you would go. You would check exclusive right to buy, and in additional amendments, you would refer back to section 7.1.1. The rate will now be 5%. Can't wait to see the first one of those that comes across my desk to look at. Questions on the listing contract and then extend? Okay. How's your hands doing? Are you getting lots of notes taken?
Can you go back? Did you say what box you checked there at the bottom? Sorry, I got interrupted.
I did not, but it depends on what it is, right? If it's a seller, you're gonna check seller. If it's a buyer, you're gonna check buyer.
Okay, so it's the same as, okay, thank you.
It aligns with exclusive right to sell or exclusive right to buy. I didn't cover that, Casey. Sorry.
That's okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I think I've left that blank.
All it's saying is the person who's signing below is either the buyer or the seller. And you're gonna
Thank you.
sign the broker, okay? Good question. I would rather not get through all of this, but to make sure I answer your questions on the ones we're doing, okay? Okay, you're taking a listing of contracts, you're doing an exclusive right to sell. So you've got your seller advisory, you've got your definitions of working relationships, and you're signing your exclusive right to sell. There are other documents that you complete with the seller at the time you're taking the listing. Those are the same documents, these disclosures, many of them will, after you go under contract, you will then have to add the buyer's name to them and send it to the buyer's agent for them to be signed. Okay, so the first one, this one only goes between you and the seller, but it's the lead-based paint obligations of seller. So tell me, what's the number one rule of when you would use this document?
If it was built before 1975.
Close.
1978.
Sorry,
If it's permitted before 1978.
1978.
That word permitted is super important. My best practice is if the house was built prior to 79, I'm filling it out. Because if it has a completion date of 78, I don't know when the permit was pulled. If the permit was done in December of 77, right, but it was built in 78, technically I'd still need it, right? So that's why, if it's 78 or before, I'm doing lead-based paint. Again, who does it hurt if I'm wrong? Nobody, okay? So this just goes through what the seller is required to do as it relates to lead-based paint. I am not going to read all these to you. You guys are all at least high school educated and you pass 168 hours of real estate. Lead-based paint disclosure, this is completed by the seller. Please do not check the boxes for them in advance. Trust me, might have caught a couple of you doing it. So lead-based paint disclosure, you put the address on, then what's gonna happen is the seller's gonna come down in this first section and they're gonna answer the question in number 2 and the question in number 3. Once they answer it, if you're a CTM user, they hit save and then their signature box will come up. Okay, so then they sign it, all right? Then once you're under contract, it goes to the buyers. Questions? Okay. Square footage disclosure. Oh, this one's fun. Okay, so this square footage disclosure is basically you disclosing as the agent where you got the information related to the size of the property for marketing purposes. Okay, so obviously the address goes there. Number 1, licensing measurement, listing licensee, meaning you has or has not measured the square footage of the property. I strongly encourage you, unless you have been trained and certified how to do it, your answer is always has not. I don't want you guys measuring property for this sake. Okay? Other sources of measurement in number 2, listing licensee, you, is or is not providing information on square footage. The answer is going to be is. And then down below, you're going to tell where you got the information. Did you get it from a prior appraisal that the seller has? If so, you check prior appraisal, you put the date of the appraisal in there, and what's the square footage? Most of us use assessor's office. You go to Realist and you type it in. Now, what we have learned is that builders don't always turn in correct information to the counties at the time they complete the houses. If you're working with a seller and they say, no, Lee, my house is 200 square feet more than what that property tax record shows. You can hire someone to go do it. Usually you want to hire an appraiser. Many of us in the office use TJ because he's been taught and certified how to do this. He's got a fee for it. I don't know what it is. It's not much. But we're learning with the newer builds, especially out in Candelas and Lane Rock and Whisper Creek and out in those areas. We're just automatically having him come measure them to make sure we have it right. So if you have someone come and measure it for you, then you would check other, and you would say appraiser measured, and they'll give you a document that you can upload with it. Now, I want to talk about how to disclose the square footage. There's no hard and fast rule on this. Bob and I have had many, many discussions about what makes sense. We really want you to call out the difference between above ground and below ground. We want you to call out the difference between finished and unfinished. So here's how we do it, and sorry, Zoom, but you're gonna have to, maybe I'll turn this around so you can see it when I'm done. Let's see if this marker works. All right, it works. So what I'm gonna do is, let's say it's 1,000 square feet above ground, so I'm gonna put the 1,000. And then I'm gonna put above ground. I abbreviate, people can understand what that means, right? ABBGRND. Then I put a slash. And I'm gonna do basement, so I do 1,000 BSMT. Okay, if there is no basement, then you could just do 1,000, right? If it was a condo, you could just do the 1,000 and be done. But if you got multiple multiple levels, or not all finished, then you need to get a little crazier, okay? Then I'm going to say 2,000 total, TTL. Okay, so I have 1,000 above ground, 1,000 below ground, it must be an Arvada or an Applewood West House Ranch, 1,000 and 1,000, 2,000 total, but they only have the basement half finished. Okay? So I'm showing all of those, all right? So I don't know if I can turn this. I'm trying, guys. I don't know if it'll work. Oh,
Barb, there you go, you got it,
did I clear it?
you cleared it now. And you're gonna, yeah, there you go.
I'm flying blind so that these guys can see. There you go. Ta-da! Can you see it? So I have 1,000 above ground, I have 1,000 basement, I have 2,000 total, and I have 1,500 finished. Okay. Oh,
That side's lovely.
yeah, the kids have been in. Paul, like, I would have never taught another class on Zoom.
I know.
All right. Questions on this document? Okay. Kelly, it's one of the ones that I correct on you guys more than you'd be surprised. Seller's property disclosure. This is not to be filled out by you. It is the seller's disclosure. Okay? Now, sometimes I might help them and I might fill in the year it was built and the year they bought it because it's in public records, but I'm not filling out anything else. Some best practices when you're talking to your sellers about this document. If you know it, disclose it. If you call me and say, hey, do you think I should disclose blah, 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 blah? The answer will always be yes. But they need to read the sections, and here's why. If you read under building conditions, it says, if you know of any of the following problems ever existing, check the yes column. Right, so let's say that they had damage due to hail, that we see a lot in Colorado, right? They're gonna check yes, we had a hailstorm in 2017. So they would check yes, because they did have damage to hail. Then they would come over here in the comments and say, hailstorm 2017, roof and siding replaced at that time, or whatever the scenario is. I'm giving you examples. Okay, if they had structural problems and they had to put in any kind of structural repairs, they would say yes, and they would say what they did to fix it. Okay, but here's where this gets tricky, you guys. When you get down here into appliances, it says if you know of any problem now existing. I can see sellers all the time that they go, yep, I got a washer and I got a dryer and I got a dishwasher, I have a disposal and I have a freezer and I have a microwave, and they start checking all these boxes. Yes, they own them. And what did the yes just say? That there's problems. So talk to your sellers about, You only check yes in this section if there's a problem, but hey, could you put the age of the appliances, if you know? If it's a new build and you bought it in 2020, you probably know you got it in 2020, unless you've replaced it since then. Okay? Going down into source of water, you can save yourself a form if you get your seller to fill out section H correctly. Section H is where they're saying, where does the water come from? Is it public? Is it a well? What is it? So if it's public, they're gonna check public. And then if it's a well, they're gonna check well, and then they're gonna put the well permit there. If they don't know the well permit, they can go search it on the Colorado Division of Water's website. Okay, then they can go down, they need to put the water provider on there. Here's my favorite thing, when you're in townhomes and condos, say, you know what they all write? HOA. But the HOA is not the source. If it's a condo in Arvada, it's probably the city of Arvada water. If it's down in Lakewood or Denver, it's probably the city of the Denver water, okay? So help them understand what's expected there. If you're in CTM, there's actually a drop down in CTM where you can start to type like Arvada water, and it will auto-populate their name, their address, their website, and their phone number, and that way your client doesn't have to go look it up. So show them that, right? Show them how to do that. The other new one that they added to this is obviously radon. I can't remember what section it was. Section and O. Section O is radon. If they had the radon tested when they bought the house or after they bought the house, they need to disclose it. Okay, that was new last year or 2 years ago. All right. If they live where there's an HOA, they need to fill out this section about the HOA. Section P, right? Is it part of an HOA? Yes. Then is there a special assessment? Who is the HOA? What is the special assessment? Right? And then here's the other one that nobody ever fills out. The location of the doggone mailbox. Okay. Again, you're not filling it out, but you need to coach your sellers through this. Okay, questions? I think that puts you all to sleep. Okay. How many of you?
Hey,
learned something?
Margaret,
Yes.
sorry, I was talking on mute, but it's my understanding that the seller's property disclosure is not a requirement. So, I mean, I know we go through this process, but what if they say, nah, I'd rather not? I mean, what does that conversation look like to another realtor? Just,
So most of the people that are gonna tell you no are investors, either the fix and flippers or somebody who's owned it as a rental property. Or it's going to be, kids settling mom and dad's estate. That's usually the types of people that are gonna say, no, I'm not gonna do it. My conversation with them looks like this. I understand you've never lived in the home. But Mr. Investor, did you not just finish fully remodeling this property? Stacy, on your flip that you just finished, did you not just put in all brand new appliances?
Correct.
So even though you've never lived in the property, you know what you did to it in the 6 weeks that you owned it.
Yes.
The buyers are gonna ask us for that information. It's usually better to just give it if you can.
And
And
seller's property disclosure protects the seller in many ways. Why would you not fill it out?
exactly, right? Because if you've disclosed everything, they can't come back and say you didn't tell
Correct.
me, right? 1 second. If you own the property as a landlord, I wish Karen G was here, right? If you've owned that property and you've had tenants in there, and the tenants call and say, hey, the roof's leaking, we got a water problem. Hey, we need a new refrigerator, it just died. Do you not know the improvements you made on your rental property while you owned it? Of course you do. You might not know every little nuance about the house, but that's not what it's asking you for. It's not asking you to mirror an inspection. It's asking you to disclose what you know. And here's what you really don't want to have happen. Here's why they want to do it, Karen. The neighbors know everything. And the neighbors will destroy a seller after closing with a thing called a bunt cake. They'll come over, welcome to the God, we're so happy to have you here. Oh my God, I couldn't believe all the work they had to do, to fix the big cracks that were in the cement. I couldn't believe how much, man, they did a really great job with that roof that was half caved in. Wow, that looks really good now that they took down all the walls. Guess what, now this new buyer is gonna start wondering. Mr. Seller, what else did you not tell me? And the minute they have a problem, they're coming after you. Your question?
So what happens when, something isn't put on there even though they've known it? So I ran into this where we went and looked at a house that was a fixer-upper, the basement had like the ceiling had like fallen down. And so there was clearly water damage, the flooring had been removed, but on the seller's property disclosure was actually in the listing, like under the additional documents. And there was nothing written under water damage.
So if I'm a buyer's agent, and I observe that in the documents that I get, I'm going to be asking some questions of the listing agent. And say, there's clearly water damage, we can see it.
Yeah.
There's nothing on the property disclosure about it, what was the cause, what happened, what did they do to fix it or not fix it, et cetera, et cetera. The hard part comes in when it's after the fact. Right, the seller doesn't disclose something after the fact, here comes the neighbor with the bundt cake. That's when lawsuits happen.
What happened in this case was I did ask the listing agent and he knew that that he was aware, the owners were aware, they did not live in the home, it was the home of their son. So they knew the water damage had happened and they knew the cause, but then my buyer was anxious to trust the rest of the property disclosure, that like the rest of it was actually accurate.
So you now have your own story to explain to sellers why it's super important to fill this out.
Yeah.
What you just described is exactly what we tell our sellers, right? I have this happen, and guess what, you guys? We're all one big team in this market center. So Jen's story that she just shared just became all of your stories. Okay? The kids who are settling mom and dad's estate. For those of you that are blessed to still have your parents around, when you have that weekly or every other day or whatever it is conversation with mom and dad, and the furnace just went out, are you hearing about it?
Yes.
So,
the air conditioner.
right, whatever it is, you're gonna know. Now, you might not remember the exact date, but you're gonna go, you know what, they did mention that the furnace went out and they had to replace it 2 or 3 years ago. So you just put it on there, 2 to 3 years. You tell what you know is always better than to disclose nothing. But to answer Karen's question, if they flat out refuse, there's nothing you can do about it as a listing agent.
It did happen to me at the house I bought here. And I was originally like, what do you mean? Don't they have to do that? No, they don't. And then, of course, if you do learn that when you're getting your license. But yeah, I think they were just full of it because they were renting. And they said, we're just renting the property. We don't know what's happened to it. I was thinking, well, yeah, you do. Because when something goes wrong, your renter calls you and says to fix it. But anyway, yeah.
Alright, any other questions about the property disclosure? When am I done at 1 o'clock? Is that when this ends? Yeah, okay, source of water addendum. If your client refuses to fill out the seller's property disclosure, or they don't do it properly on the seller's property disclosure, you then need to fill out the source of water addendum. It's basically the same thing as that section. You will also see this if you're selling vacant land that doesn't have a well, or maybe it has a well, but it doesn't have a house, you will also use this same document there, okay? Same thing, you just fill out, where are you getting the water from? Is it a well, is it city, whatever it is, alright? Closing instructions. This is now, we used to have to do this early in the stages. And that was because the title companies all had their own version of the form, and it wasn't approved by the commission. Since then, the title companies, the reputable title companies, have all agreed to use the commission document. So as a listing agent, you can choose to do this at the time you take the listing, or you can just let the title company do it and make it part of the closing process. There's no wrong answer. But if you're going to do it early, then you're gonna fill it out with the date, it's gonna have the sellers and buyers' names, and it's gonna put on there, under where it says the word engage in section 1, that's the name of the title company. Land title, Heritage title, Chicago title, First American, whoever it is, okay? You're gonna put the street address in, you're gonna show the date of the contract to buy and sell that both buyer and seller signed. And then you're gonna put in there, title commitment, closing company agrees. I actually do agrees on both of them. Okay, there's going to be in here a fee. Closing company will receive a fee of, you need to know what the closing company charges, for their fees. Their costs, they change them on a regular, somewhat regular basis as costs go up. It's usually under $400. So whatever that amount is that your company's charging goes there in section 5. And section 8, how is the seller gonna get their proceeds? We'll just go back to your listing agreement. It's either going to be a cashier's check or funds electronically transferred. Okay, and it goes through a lot of things. You guys can read the documents. This is signed by the buyer, the seller, and the title company escrow officer. So Robin, if you use land title, Robin or Sherry, pretty much who's gonna sign. Okay. Change of status. This is a form that is used when you are going from an agency relationship to transaction broker. So you're going to use this when you have an agency relationship with the seller and you have an agency relationship with the buyer. Okay, you can't represent both as an agent if the buyer wants to buy your seller's property, true? So you've got to go to what? You gotta go to transaction broker with both.
Would this be like if I'm a listing agent, but I also have a buyer and they can see my house and they love it? Okay.
Absolutely, right? So we got listings all over, right? Our listings are sitting under, right? And if one of my buyers, who I also have a signed agreement with, actually likes a listing that they see of mine that comes on the market, and this actually could happen to us this weekend. I kind of hope it does, right? I have an agency relationship with my seller. We've assigned agency relationship with these buyers. By the way, we picked them up at an open house, if anybody doesn't think open houses work, okay? They're gonna see this property on our social media and on our marketing when we send it out to all of our database. They could come to me and say, Margaret, we're gonna come to the open house, so they come showing up at the open house. Right, and they go, oh my God, we love it so much more than we thought we were going to, can we put it in an offer? I have an agency relationship with the seller and an agency relationship with the buyer. I would fill out, at the time I'm writing the contract to buy and sell for the buyers, the offer, I will create a change of status notice for the buyer, and I'll create a change of status notice for the seller. So the buyer's gonna sign it at the same time we sign the offer. Then when I present the offer to the seller, I'm going to also include this change of status. Okay? Questions? Pretty intuitive, right? You just have to fill in the blanks.
I had a question, Margaret.
Yeah,
So say you're a transaction broker with the buyer and then the seller has an agent. How would that work out? Like say, so the seller has an agent and then I'm working with the buyer and then I'm listed as a transaction broker. Would I have to move to agency since the seller has an agent already?
no, you don't have to, except the office policy says that you need to have an agency relationship with your buyers unless you are on a double-ended side. You're not going to use change of status if you're only on one side of the transaction.
Like I'm trying
You
to say,
should always be going in with an agency relationship.
because if like my question is, okay, so say if I'm a referee of the contract between the seller and the buyer has an agent or the seller has an agent already, how would it, would I be butting heads with the seller agent?
Well, if the seller has an independent agent and it's not you, then this doesn't matter.
Okay, but
So let's pretend that Brandon is the listing agent, okay? Brandon has an agency agreement with the seller, true?
yes,
And you have an agency relationship with a buyer, true?
true.
Doesn't matter, there's no need to do a change of status because there's two independent agents, one representing each side of the transaction.
Right, but my question is like, say if I put down transaction broker, and then if I went to make an offer as a referee, and then the seller has the agent already, how would that work out?
So first of all, the office won't let you do that. You do not sign an exclusive right to buy as a transaction broker. The
Okay.
only time you're going to be a transaction broker in this office is if you're representing both the buyer and the seller.
Okay,
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I have another question.
Oh, go ahead.
So what happens with your compensation then, when this change happens? If you have a relationship with the seller at a certain percentage and then a buyer at a certain percentage, then do those combine and you get the combined?
Yeah, because you're representing both sides, right? You still have an exclusive right to buy with your minimum success fee. You have a listing agreement that has your success fee in it as a listing agent. And then, now, what you might do is, and this goes into that class more than this one, but if you might negotiate with your seller, I think we have one of these right now, where if I have both sides, the buyer and the seller, I reduce my overall compensation. So if you go back and watch the clause class that I taught, that's on the YouTube channel, there's actually clauses that Damien has written that in the event you bring the buyer to your seller, depending on how you fill out section 7.1.1, your compensation will either increase or decrease. Okay, so that's all covered in your exclusive right to sell, but you would absolutely still fill out the contract to buy and sell for whatever that minimum buyer agency fee is. Now, if you've got an agreement somewhere with the seller, then you need to talk to me on how we want to lay that out. Okay? But your compensation, that's why those agency agreements, you guys, are so important when you're out showing properties. Because it's the only way you guarantee you're getting paid. Right? And it's also in the best interest of your client. Right? When showing properties as a transaction broker, can you really tell them what if the price is right? No. If you're the transaction broker, can you really tell them about concerns you have about the property? Only if they're adverse material facts, but there's concerns all the time that we have on properties that aren't adverse material facts. So if you're going to counsel about risks and rewards and all these things, you need to have that agency relationship which protects the client. Right? I know we always say it's the only way you're going to guarantee you get paid. Well, unfortunately, there's no guarantees, but it gives you a higher probability, right? But the reality is it protects your client, and that means you can serve them at the highest level. We all went into this business not to get rich, right? Why did we choose this as a career? Somebody tell me why you chose real estate as a career. Because it's easy?
To help people.
Why?
To help people. 'Cause
To
I've
help
been-
people.
have a great experience with
So
learning.
here's your problem. You want to help. And you help to the point that you cross a line. Right? And so that agency relationship helps you be the person that you want to be with that big heart who wants to help everybody, as well as protects your client and they get the best of you. And trust me, you are worth the best of what you have. You are here learning how to do contracts. And what's our number one value proposition as an agent? Casey and Stacy can't answer. What's our number one value proposition as an agent?
Knowing the contracts.
Bingo! Your understanding of contracts and how they work and what those sections mean and how to write that contract in the best interest of your client and understanding when you get pushback to understand what it means. That's your number one value prop. So I got kudos to Brandon and to Lee and to Karen and to Casey and to, oh my God, Tiva? Tara, I knew it was like that. And Jen and losing my mind and Tisha and to Christy and to Stacy to be here to learn these things. You are all going to be better agents because you're here. Okay, all right, I just went on a soapbox, all right, post-closing occupancy agreement. My least favorite document of all of them. Post-closing occupancy agreement is basically a short-term lease. That's an agreement where the seller can stay in a home after closing. So many spikes happen with these things after the fact. So, and there's a lot of risk. There's risk to the seller and there's risk to the buyers. Because here's the reality, what if the seller doesn't get out, what is the buyer gonna do? They get to go through the eviction process. That doesn't happen today. Okay? If the seller damages the property and they only took $1,000 security deposit and they made $5,000 worth of damages, what's the new buyer gonna do? Yeah, exactly, right? Doesn't sound like much fun, does it? All right, that doesn't mean these don't have a purpose, because they do. With the price of homes that we play with here in the Denver metro area, not everybody can buy a house without selling their current home. And if you go back into the market of 2022 and 2021, contingent offers, we didn't accept them. So sellers were in a place where they had to be not just under contract, they had to be sold and closed before they brought an offer on their new home. Nobody wanted to be homeless. So these became a necessary evil. Okay, the maximum time frame that you can do a post-closing occupancy agreement is 60 days. It's an agreement between the buyer and the seller. Their names go in section 1, as well as the street address and legal description. Section 2 talks about the agreement. It's the date of the contract to buy and sell. When did they go into an agreement? And possession, what day do they maintain possession through? So you're gonna put a hard date there. It is my recommendation that you make that date match the possession date that you have in the contract to buy and sell. Okay. Maintenance, it states that once that deal closes, it's now the buyer's expense to maintain the property. So when the air conditioning goes out 2 days after closing, who gets to pay to replace it, the seller or the buyer? The buyer. Okay, section 5 says that the seller does any damages, it's on whose dime? His. Buyer's access, this says the buyer cannot access the home without 24 hours notice unless it's an emergency. They're technically the landlord. For those of you that are renters, can your landlord walk in your house anytime they want to? No. Okay, rent. Here's the thing. We used to do these with no rent, but then we would charge a security deposit. Well, a change in the laws that went into effect for us in 2024 stated that a security deposit could not exceed more than 2 times the rent. So if you put in 0 rent, how much security deposit can you take? 0. So you have to put some kind of rent in that's at least 50% of whatever the security deposit is. Now, there's been a lot of creative ways to do this. I've seen people raise the purchase price of the home by $1,000 and then charge $1,000 rent and $1,000 security deposit. I've seen that. I've seen people put in there the rent at $1,000 and the security deposit at $2,000, and then they put a clause in that says if they vacate on time, they refund not only the rent but the security deposit. See how that just worked? Okay. So if you need some help getting creative with that, let me know. Failure to vacate, this should mirror the dollar amount that's in the contract to buy and sell if they don't get out on time. And then section 11, who's gonna pay the water and sewer? Here's Margaret's belief on this, there's no wrong answer, everything's negotiable, but I check the buyers. How many of you want the seller to turn off the water on the beautifully landscaped home that's in July, and they're gonna stay in the house till September? You're gonna have dead grass to replace, it's gonna cost you a whole lot more than the water bill. Okay, if it's an HOA, oftentimes the water's, depending on where you're at, sometimes the water's already in there, so you're paying it anyway as the buyer. So I do buyer pays the water and sewer. You can do whatever you want. It also gets very complicated if you have the seller pay it, because water transfers at title at closing. Okay, so Casey's the buyer and Brandon's the seller. Title's moving that water bill into Casey's name the day it closes. So who's gonna calculate the prorates? Casey? I know our math skills, it's not gonna work. Love you, Case. Okay? Alright, keep it simple. Okay, explain to your buyers why they wanna pay the water, because you don't want the grass dead. Okay? Electric and gas, I make the seller pay. That is super easy to change with Excel as of the date of possession. So let them pay for the heat, let them pay for the electricity, let the buyer pay for the water. That's my best practice. It doesn't mean that's how you have to do it. Seller will have renter's insurance on the policy. Even though your buyer will have insurance on the home effective day one at closing, the seller needs to have renter's insurance as well to cover their property inside and all of that. What I tell my sellers is just call your agent, tell them what you're doing, and they'll figure out how to do the policy. Sometimes they just extend the homeowners. Some companies actually switch them to a renter's insurance for a couple of months. And then in section 15, you put the security deposit.
I have a question, Margaret. Does
Yeah,
it not become kind of, I do this probably too often, but when you have a security deposit, doesn't that have to be, don't they have to pay that at closing?
yes,
So that
Good.
becomes another like fee that you have to know is coming back. Like it seems like it's probably worth doing that on a more expensive home, but it seems like a lot of work. If you-
yeah, security deposit. If you took the ACU with Damien in January, what is his thoughts on post-closing occupancy agreements with security deposits?
He hates them.
That was his exact word, because all three of you all said it, okay? Here's why. Okay, so the security deposit, the seller needs to pay it at closing. How does that happen? Kind of depends on the buyer's lender. Sometimes the buyer's lender will have that as a credit to the buyer's closing cost. So the buyer never sees that $1,000 or $2,000 change hands, right? Or sometimes the title company will disperse a check payable to the buyer out of the seller's proceeds. Or the third option is the seller writes a check to the buyer at the closing table. So no matter which side of the fence you're on, if you have a post-closing occupancy happening with a security deposit, you two agents need to be talking to make sure you know how it's gonna be handled. And then you need to be looking for it on the settlement statement if that's where it's appropriate. When you are the buyer's agent, when it comes to a security deposit, when does the security deposit have to be given back to the buyer or back to the seller?
Like 30 days.
30 days, it says so right there in section 15. 30 days, or you need to tell them why you're keeping it. Okay?
Because I don't like you.
Don't, and if you don't send it to them until 31 days after, Mr. Buyer, they could take you for 3 times. So that $2,000 security deposit that you, oh my God, I was so busy moving, I forgot to send it back to them, could cost you $6,000. So it's super important that your buyers understand that security deposit isn't free money. The other thing is, let's say, we had one of these, I don't think this was you, Casey. We had one recently where the buyer said, well, I don't want to give them the security deposit because they didn't clean it as well as I thought they should have. Is that a reason why they get to keep the security deposit? No. Or this was an even better one. Well, we want to keep the security deposit because we didn't have them fix some things in the inspection objection, but they're still broken, so we want to keep the money to fix it. Can you do it? Nope. No. Okay. So there's a lot of craziness that happens with these post-closing occupancy agreements, and yet the reality is we need them. We absolutely need them. All right, questions? Okay. Whew, those are all documents that go with the contract to buy and sell. Now let's pretend that the seller goes, well, I like most of the offer, but I'd like to do a counter offer. So the documents you're gonna use is what I have on the screen, it's called counter proposal. This is completed by the seller's agent. Now, if your seller is doing a counter to a contract to buy and sell, the seller never signs the contract to buy and sell. The seller only signs the counter offer. Or counter proposal, I guess is the term. So if you do this correctly out of CTM, the top part will pre-populate with the dates, the legal, the address, the names of the parties. So if you're tweaking dates, listing agents, you're going to do it here in section 2. So if you're making adjustments in dates, so what I like to do is I will click the no change box first, so that it goes check, 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 check all the way down and everything says no change. Then I go in and I change only the dates I'm gonna fix or change. If I'm deleting one, we had one last night where they put a conditional sale deadline in an offer that didn't have a conditional sale. So I deleted that, so then I unchecked no change and moved it to deleted. So if you're changing dates, you use section 2. If all the dates that the buyer's agent sent over is perfect, then you can actually hide this section in CTM, so the form doesn't print out 2 pages like it does here, okay? Section 3 of the counter proposal talks about section 4 of the contract to buy and sell. If you're changing the money, it goes here. Okay, so if you're changing the purchase price, listing agents, you have to complete the whole section, not just fill in the new purchase price. So you're still gonna show the earnest money as it reflects on the contract to buy and sell. And then if it's a loan, I recalculate what the loan amount will be. And I do that by just determining what's the loan to value, or what's the amount of the loan percentage on the original offer, and I move it over and use the same percentage. So if they're doing a 10% down on the original offer, the loan amount was 90% of the purchase price. So on my counter offer, the loan's gonna be 90% of the purchase price. Okay, again, if you need help with that, call your phone friend, that's what I'm there for, to help you figure out how to do that. Then in section 5, this is where you make all the other changes. Okay, the most popular changes are concessions. Maybe the buyer in their original offer in section 4 requested seller concessions of $15,000. And your seller says, nope, I'm only willing to give them 10. So you're gonna go into other changes and you're going to write section and then put the section number. This is my favorite way to write this. Section whatever shall now read as follows. And then I copy the sentence, not the whole section out of the contract to buy and sell, but the section. The sentence, and I'll say, seller to pay blank amount seller concessions or whatever it says. Okay, because guess what? If I use the contract language, isn't that already perfect? Okay, you're also going to do other changes. If you get down into section 15, right, where all of the HOA fees are, where they check seller, 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 or buyer, 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 who's going to pay all the different fees, and you say, oh no, I am not paying that fee in 15.3. Seller says, I'm not paying that. That's a future expense, that's on them. You go in, section 15.3 shall be changed to reflect seller. Okay, so you want to be very specific. I heard the best thing when I was teaching in Iowa the other day. Michelle said, the contract and the counter offer should be so clear that someone who doesn't understand contracts know who's in charge or what's supposed to happen. So your counter offer just needs to be super clear. You just want to make sure you got it, okay? You also will put an acceptance deadline, just like they have an acceptance deadline, the buyer, when they send in their offer, there's an acceptance deadline of when the seller needs to sign. Your counter offer needs to have an acceptance deadline as well. Okay, questions? Okay, another document we see oftentimes that goes along with the contract to buy and sell is the exchange addendum. You're going to use the exchange addendum when one of the two parties is doing a 1031 exchange. It is amazing to me how many agents don't understand this. So if you, as the buyer's agents, are hearing the listing agent when you're talking to them talk about 1031, you might even ask the question, well, hey, with my offer, do I need to include the exchange addendum? Wow, you just look smart, didn't you? Okay, so if it's a rental property, or if it's a rental property and they've had it for a long time as a rental property, I might ask the listing agent, hey, are they doing a 1031 exchange on this? If you know, okay? So how does this fill out? The amendment, it's gonna have the property address, the legal description, the date of the contract, buy and sell, and then in section 2. You have to check 2 boxes. In 2A and 2B, you pick buyer or seller, but they're not the same in each box. So section A is, who is the exchanging party? Who is the person using the 1031 exchange? Is it the seller who's selling an investment property to buy another one? Or is it the buyer who sold an investment property and is buying a new one? Okay? And then B, the cooperating party is the one who's not doing the actual exchange. Okay? Your clients, if you're helping guide them through a 1031, you need a 1031 exchange mediator. Third party, they hold the money. Land Title has a division that does that. There's also a company called 1031X that Kevin and I both recommend. If you need help with that, let us know. But that's when you use this form, with that when one side or the other is doing a 1031 exchange. We used to do this with a clause, and I still see agents, old school agents, not using the form but trying to put a clause in. And I would counter back and I would remove the clause and send this form. Okay, questions? We're like, no, Margaret, because you have no more time left and we're tired of listening to you talk. Okay, personal property agreement. You are going to use this when you are buying a property where personal property out of the ordinary are being included and they have a value. So let's pretend you're buying mountain property, and one of the things that the seller is offering for the buyer to buy is a big old tractor with a snowplow on it. You would use the personal property agreement to capture the value and the amount they're paying for the tractor. Okay. You would also use this if you're buying a property that's fully furnished. Maybe your client, we're gonna start seeing these down here, I think. Airbnbs that are fully furnished. And your client's buying it as an Airbnb and they're gonna buy all the furniture that's in it. All the furniture goes on the personal property agreement, not on the contract to buy and sell. And I'm not gonna read this through, you guys can read through it, it's pretty intuitive. Okay, but that's when you use it. If you need help, just call us and we'll help you through it. But that's when you use it, and I wanted to make sure you guys have that. Okay, the other most popular document, I'm waiting for the day, I have a contract that never has one of these. Amend extend contract. This is where buyer and seller are agreeing to make changes from the original contract agreements. We see a lot of changes when it comes to this around dates. We see a lot of changes around this, around purchase price. We see a lot of changes around this in concessions. Okay, when you're changing money, you're going to always use the agreement to amend extend. And that's a really important thing that I just said, and I hope y'all wrote it down. When it has to do with money, you always capture it on the amend extend. And what I'm referencing is when you get into the process of negotiating inspection items, and maybe one of the agreements is that the seller is going to give additional concessions to the buyer at closing instead of making the repairs. Some of you want to put it on the resolution and put it on an amend extend, but you just doubled the amount. Anything related to money, I only want on the amend extend, because you also, your lenders are going to see this, okay? So you just want to change the money, all right? Questions on this one? The most used one. All right, this is the least used, and it's actually one of my favorites. Because I think it gives you leverage when you're a buyer's agent. It can give you leverage. Extension or termination of contract. So let's say you're in you're pumping, you're hitting a deadline and you need to change something, right? Maybe you need to push out a date, right? Or maybe you need to change a dollar amount. However, your deadline is there. So let's pretend it's inspection resolution, because that was easy. Okay, it's inspection resolution, and the agreement is there's going to be an amendment for a price reduction. Can we keep it that simple? You guys all good with that? If the seller doesn't sign the agreement by your deadline, what happens? It's terminated, or what if it puts your buyer in default? Right, what if it puts your buyer in default? Okay, you don't want your buyers to be in default. But you're pushing a deadline. So I might send this document and the top half looks like your normal amended extent, right? Doesn't that look like the amended extent we just looked at? Got the address, it's got the dates, it's got the other additional provisions, right? Got it in there, push the dates out. Give me the extension. I need more time, there's a structural thing, I need to push out my inspection objection, let's do that one. We've done the home inspection. The inspector has said, you know what, there's some things here structurally, I think you need to get a structural engineer out. And you're bumped up against the inspection objection deadline, y'all with me? You can't get the structural engineer out there for 2 more days. But you need to do the objection tonight, what are you gonna do? You normally would do an amended extend to push the date out, right? But what if the seller is like, you're up against a deadline and they're not the fastest at taking care of things? If they don't sign it on time, now have you lost your right to the objection? Say yes. That's not what you want, right? So you're going to put your date extension in the top part of this contract, but then look at the bottom. But if you don't do it, we're terminating. You guys get this? If the seller doesn't give you the inspection objection extension, you are putting them on notice. If they don't sign it, then you're terminating under inspection. You guys are all taking that in, aren't you? Thoughts, questions?
I didn't do this, but I just lost, we did not get ours turned in time and we lost our objection.
Right, but you still wanted to buy the house.
Yes, we did.
So in that case, you might not have delayed it. Here's what I'm telling you guys. Those deadlines in Colorado are not recommendations like they are in Ohio. Great. Okay, they're serious. So if you're gonna put in your offers as buyer agents a time of day deadline of 7 PM, that's 7 PM, it's not 8 PM. Which is why I tell you not to put the time of day in. That gives you till midnight. Right? And so Casey just said, she had a situation where she couldn't get a hold of the inspection, things were tight. They didn't get the inspector in, and then by the time she talked to them, and by the time she got a hold of them to sign the objection, deadline was gone. So the buyer lost their right to object, and they lost their right to terminate under inspection without losing their earnest money. If we would have left the deadline till midnight, she probably would have got a hold of them, would have gone out and knocked on the door and woke them up.
Let's not put a time in the top of your contract to buy and sell.
Yep, it's a horrible thing, horrible. I've seen too many problems as a result of that, I know that's not what the intent was.
Won't happen again with me. Will not happen again.
Alright, so let's pretend, the next one's called agreement to revive contract. So, this is where, for whatever reason, the contract has been terminated. And earnest money has not been released. That's a very important ad hoc item. The contract was terminated, but earnest money has not been released. And buyer and seller wake up the next morning and go, okay, we were both stupid, let's keep this deal together. Where I see this happening most frequently would be in the inspection process. Inspection objection has been sent from the buyer to the seller. And the seller either doesn't get the resolution over to them on time, or so close to the deadline, the buyer doesn't get a chance to sign it, or whatever reason, and it automatically terminates under the resolution process. Okay, everybody following my scenario? Next morning, the agents are talking to each other and they're like, nobody wanted this to terminate, let's keep this together. You would complete this form that says we're keeping this together. Okay, so this form is used to use something that was terminated, okay? Alright. Yeah, I always tell you guys, those of you that are in our momentum group, and I always tell you wanna learn something, teach it. I learned there's a new document. Actually, it's not very new, it's been around since January of 2023. It's amazing what you find when you go out to door at 10 o'clock at night. Assignment of lease, if you are selling a property where there is a lease in place. So remember, if you're the listing agent and the seller is a landlord and there's a tenant in place with a lease, what happens to the lease when the house is sold?
If they have an agreement, doesn't it carry through till this is up?
The lease goes to the new owner. Okay, so this document is an assignment of that lease from the seller to the buyer. I just have to be really honest, I had no idea this existed. Fortunately, most of us won't sell properties with tenants in place, so maybe that's why I didn't know about it. All right, inspection objection notice. Oh my God, we're not gonna make it. Okay, inspection objection notice. This is the document that you're going to use as a buyer's agent when your buyer has completed the home inspection process and there are things that they want addressed by the seller. So you're gonna fill out the upper section, and then in section 1.2, you are going to describe what you want the seller to do. So you might say, seller to credit buyer at closing $5,000 in concessions to address the following things. And then you lay out the things that are down below. Because the buyer's willing to pay for them and get those fixed after closing. There might be things that you want the seller to repair prior to closing. You might want a new roof installed. You might want a radon system installed. You might want the HVAC cleaned and certified. You might want who knows what, and it's not you. When I say you, I mean your buyer. So you're going to put in there, seller to have a licensed roofing company replace and install a new roof. Seller to have I lost my words. Seller to have a qualified technician install a new radon mitigation system. Seller to have an electrician to come in and replace the electrical panel. This is where you're going to put that in section 1.2. 1.3, inspection report is or is not attached. There's no wrong answer here. Everything's a strategy. I personally very rarely include the full inspection report out of a professional courtesy. Because if I give the seller the entire report and we end up not closing, the seller has to disclose everything, right? Like they know everything about the house, right? So what I will normally do is I will just use the snipping tool and I will include in my email to the listing agent just the section of the inspection report that's related to the items I'm calling out. Now, strategy, it's all strategy. Let's say that we have an inspection report that just goes on and on and on with all the things that are wrong with the house. Health and safety things, like these are things. And my buyer says, look, Margaret, I will take care of everything else if you can get them to replace the roof. So my inspection objection might say seller to install a new roof. And then I am going to attach the inspection report because I want them to see all the things my buyer didn't ask for that they could have. Right? So you got to use a little bit of strategy thought of whether you're going to do it or not do it. I know that there are agents in this office that they always include it. I think sometimes if your buyer's getting really picky on things, I think it could hurt you. Okay, so everything's a strategy. Questions, comments, etc., etc. Inspection resolutions completed by the seller's agent. This is the seller's response to the objection that the buyer sent over. So in section 2, this is where the seller says exactly what they're going to do. And you guys, you got to be specific, but vague. Okay. So I will just, I'm not gonna go there. You need to make sure that as a listing agent, you're very specific on what you're going to do and not going to do. Okay. And who's going to do it. Okay? And if you're offering money, you're offering a concession, do you put it on the resolution? Where do you put it? You send an amend at the same time. If your way of dealing as the listing agent, you and the buyer's agent, you guys go talk about it, we're just gonna do a concession only, then you don't even fill out a resolution. You fill out the amend extend. Once it's signed by both parties, this buyer goes in and retracts the inspection objections, they withdraw it. Okay, we had that, Jen, on one of yours, right, where they withdrew it after we got the concession. Okay? Super important. Questions? Okay, I'm not gonna go through these. Title objection. Appraisal objection. Okay, there's all these other objection notices. If it's appropriate, use them, they're pretty intuitive. Notice to terminate. Somehow I missed this here. Notice to terminate, this is the document that's used when one of the two parties is gonna terminate the contract. Who has most of the rights to terminate? Buyer. The only time the seller really has the right to terminate is if it's financing and they're going, yeah, this buyer doesn't qualify, I'm not playing games. Okay, so this is the notice that you use to terminate the contract. Okay, it only has to be signed by the terminating party, not the other party. Okay, the other thing that we see that goes hand in hand with that is called the earnest money release form. This does need to be signed by both parties. This instructs whoever's holding the earnest money of what to do with the earnest money. Okay, so you're gonna have the seller's name, the buyer's name, the property address, the date of the contract, the amount of the earnest money. In section 2, you're going to put in there who the check is payable to. Unfortunately, in our work, we see an awful lot of cases where we have couples who are not making it. So if you have a case where we have two parties who aren't Mr. and Mrs. or have joint accounts anymore, and that 10,000 of earnest money goes to go 5,000 to him and 5,000 to her, then you could put that on there under A and B. And then, you do not, in most cases, want to check the box in number 3. Most of the time, you're not gonna check that. Signed by buyer and seller, and then that's sent to the title company or who's ever holding the earnest money, that they know what to do with it. Finally, I want to talk about one more document, so if you guys can give me 4 more minutes, I'll get you out of here, out there. The TD 1000, this is a document you will not create, you will see it at the closing table. And this document is used by the county assessor's offices, because when they assess property taxes, they look at what homes have sold for, correct? So what they're looking for is what's off base, right? If they're in a neighborhood and everything's like 475, 480, 490, 500, all of a sudden they see one that's 350. Does that raise a flag? Yes. If they see one that's automatically 600, does that raise a flag? Yes. So they're probably gonna pull this document. Your title companies actually will fill out most of this document for you. Okay? Because they have all the information. But they're going to turn to you as buyer's agents. And they're saying, you wanna go ahead and do this with your client. Now, they used to always do that. Now sometimes they started doing it themselves. But I want you to be prepared for it. So the 2 items that you're going to get to deal with is number 5. The very first sentence says, list any personal property included in the transaction that, underline the words, materially impacts the total sale price. Let me ask you this, does the dishwasher, the refrigerator, the washer, the dryer, and the microwave significantly change the purchase price on the home? No. So all they have to do is write NA or none. Okay, but let's pretend they got a Porsche. First of all, they should have done the personal property document, right? But let's pretend they didn't. And there's a Porsche, would that materially change the purchase price of the home?
Yes.
They're gonna show the Porsche, and then they're going to show what's the value. Okay? The other one that you're going to get asked to talk about with your buyer is number 9. No, number 10. Mark any of the following that apply to the condition of the improvements at the time of purchase. These are what is the condition of the home that they're purchasing. Is it new? Well, you might use it on your new build,
Yeah.
right? But, and Jen's gonna use it on her new build. We got all kinds of new builds in the room today, right? New, It could be salvage or something in between. Most of the homes are gonna be in that good average, maybe fair. Okay? It's the buyer's interpretation of it. We don't have an opinion. Okay? I just explain it to my buyers like this at the closing table. So number 10 is what's the overall condition of the property? It's obviously not new. It is obviously not salvage. And they'll go, well, it's somewhere in the middle. And I'll go, yep, so good, average with whatever one you pick, I don't care. The other thing with this document is, I tell my buyers, if you ever get a copy of this sent to you by the assessor's office and they want you to fill it out, you better fill it out. You have a copy of your closing documents, I have a copy of my closing documents, and so does the title company. If you don't fill it out and send it back, what is it, Stacy, $50 a year?
I don't remember, they charge you something.
They charge like 25 or $50 a year on the property taxes till they get the form back. So just fill it out, and send it back. It's not a negative form, it's just information for the county assessment, so. All right. Woo! What do you guys think? Was this class worth your time?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
You work the time.
All right, guys, have a fantastic day. Let me know how I can do to help you. Go out and make some new friends and let's do some business. I will talk to you all later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah, thank you. So my friend Sarah finally called Dale. It's very early days because she's in the middle of the course.